everyone, it's Stephanie with Beach Potato Embroidery. This is part 4 of our beach bag series. We are going to be stitching out the tater tot block. So this block is going to go together just like all the other ones did. We're using our anti-soft and stable for our bag making. This is going to be making the tater tots block. So we're going to take this back to the machine, stitch our placement stitch, and then start adding our fabric. So we have our placement stitch for our sand fabric. We're going to lay that in place just a 1/4 inch past the placement stitch up here and about 1/2 inch all the way around on all sides. Now that our tack down stitch is done, we're going to lay our water fabric right on top. And it's about a 1/4 inch past that stitch line. And we're going to tack it down in place. What's nice with this method is that it's just a quick flip and fold. So you're able to really get a nice fabric block all pieced in the hoop using your embroidery machine just by flipping and folding fabric. So we folded this fabric towards the top of the hoop. We're tacking it down in place. And this block is an easier block. It only has 2 little appliques on here. This is our tater tots. I'm going to be laying our tater tot fabric on top of it, and we're going to tape this in place and tack it down. And now we're just going to be adding details to our block. We're doing fill stitches, we're creating a sand bucket, we're going to be doing satin stitches around the tater tots. We're going to be making some sand castles. So this is all decorative from here on out. And it's just changing your thread color. So our last panel is now complete. We're going to set our panels aside and start working on the straps of the bag. I have a 4-inch piece of fabric cut out. It's folded in place and ironed, and then I ironed the pieces to the center there. And if you use fusible batting, you can then iron this to your fabric and then iron this closed, and then this will be folded over and stitched in place and then set aside. So we're just sewing our straps together with our fused batting in place. And it's just along the edge there. So it's just kind of tacking it down. And I have my bobbin thread and my top thread matching. Now that the straps are done, we're going to be doing our pocket panel. And we're just stitching this white fabric and tacking it down by following the placement stitch that we did in the embroidery machine earlier. But now we're just using our sewing machine and following along that line. Now it's time to start assembling the bag. So this is the front of our bag. It's 3 panels. So we got our beach potato panel, our bird panel, and our chair panel. And all we have to do is just line these up. This is going to be your sew line. You're going to stitch just to the left of it or right on top. And we're going to line up our fabric registration marks here to make sure everything comes out even. We now have this sewn together. And we need to do the back side. So this is the back side of our bag with Mrs. French Fry, the airplane, and the tater tots. All we're going to be doing is taking this panel, sewing it to this one, going straight down the edge there, using the white line as our sewing point where we can either stitch on it or just to the left of it. And then once those two are stitched together, we will stitch this one, same process. And then we'll work on our side pockets. So I'm attaching the 3rd panel just by stitching to the left of that stitch line there. And now we have the front and the back of our beach bag. Now let's work on the sides. So we have our pocket panel, and what this is our quilted side pocket, and then we have the actual pocket that we're going to be making. And so to do this, we're just going to use our placement stitch line, and we're just going to line it along the straight edge of the quilted side pocket, and we're going to stitch this straight on. So this is now stitched in place on the one side here. We need to get it onto this side, so we're going to turn our pocket panel, and sometimes pins help, and you're just going to lay this over the placement stitch here, and it's going to kind of create a pocket as you stitch it down. And now our last step is just stitching the bottom closed. And now we have both beach potato side pockets. Next step is to start adding cork. So for this last part of the bag, we're sewing our cork to the bottom of our panels, and I also added the Annie Soft and Stable Foam. That's optional, you don't have to have that. It's just going to give it a little bit more stability on the bottom of the bag, and I'm using our registration lines that were placement stitches in previous steps as where we're stitching on. Now if you see here, it's going to be a little bit longer, which is fine because we're going to trim that out. I am going to top stitch it just to make it lay flatter, and I'm going to switch my thread to where it will match the cork. I think I'm going to use a metallic gold thread just to make it a little extra shiny, and I will continue with the next step. So this next step of assembling our beach bag is laying down our lining for the inside. So I have our lining fabric. I'm using a batik, so there is no wrong side with it. And I have it laid out on my cutting mat. I have my 3 front panels all sewn together and assembled, and we have our cork assembled to the bottom of the bag. I did add the optional foam on there. You could use batting, you could use a Peltex, whatever it is that you want to use. And we're just laying that on top. And then we have our side pocket panel here. This is not sewn, and it's just to kind of determine placement of how big we need this lining to be. Depending on your stitches, it might differ slightly by an inch. So we're going to go ahead and trim this out, and we're just going to cut the fabric along the top here and along the bottom there, and then we're going to pin this in place and set the lining aside. This is going to be attached on the sides, and we're going to kind of make a boxing shape. So I set the lining aside as we're not going to do that until the last step, and I have our pocket panel pinned in place. I made sure to follow up with our registration points of the cork meeting with the cork, and we're going to sew this straight down and attach it to the front part of our bag. Now that this side of the bag is attached with that side pocket, we're going to take our back side panel here with all 3 of them. We're going to pin this in place, and we're going to attach these 2 together. So this is what it looks like where it's pinned from the sides and on the top, and so we have this as part of all our bag making here, and we have it pinned to the side panel. We just need to sew along the line there, and we'll be able to go on to the next panel. Now that our bag is fully sewn together, we just have to sew it closed. So we're going to fold this over, and we're going to sew straight down the bottom to finish closing it off. We now have our bag right side out, and this is what it looks like inside. So now we need to make our lining for this bag. So I have our lining all laid out. I cut out our corners so we can box those, and we're gonna box those corners before adding it on. We now have our lining created, and we just need to add our handles, and then we're going to pull our lining through the bottom of the hole after we go finish top stitching around the top of this bag here. So we added our handles. I sewed the lining fabric around the top part, and we are good to go to pull this through. And our beach bag is now complete. This will be available at beachpotatoembroidery.com very soon. This will be a full kit with everything you need to make it.